No one has enough time. Robots can give us more time, and that's really the crux of the automated abundance economy. Human beings do not have to die. We can use science and technology to overcome our biological tendency to age.
I'm Barbara Lorenz, and you are listening to Bitcoin-Keba, the podcast from Bitcoin Basis. Hi Zoltan, welcome to the show. I've read that your journey began with sailing around the world with 500 handpicked books. Can you take us back to the time, what happened and what sparked that adventure?
Sure. My life is, I like to think of my life as a big adventure because it's most interesting that way. But what happened is when I was about 20 years old, I started dreaming about kind of sailing around the world and just leaving with a bunch of books. And so I worked for about a year. I kind of bagged groceries and I worked at a pizza company just making pizzas, just a very low paying job. But I earned enough money to buy a small sailboat. Sailboats are very cheap. They're only a few $1,000s. And if you buy it carefully, you can buy one that can cross oceans. So I bought a 26-footer. And I left, after buying the boat, I left California in 1991 and began sailing around the world. And what happened is I spent the very first 4 years in the South Pacific, which was an amazing thing. But the thing about sailboats is you have to understand is they're kind of like floating apartments. I had all these books. I was just reading. I was spearfishing all day. I was surfing. I mean, literally the best times of my life. I almost wish I could go back there because I had almost no responsibilities except basically keeping the boat afloat and living the great life, kind of adventuring in the South Pacific. So it was really a truly wonderful time of my life. And to make things even better, at the very end, I began working for National Geographic. And then I began writing articles from my sailboat and sending them to National Geographic. And that's sort of when I became a journalist.
Yeah. And then you explored 100 countries. And then what else happened at National Geographic?
I left from California, went to Hawaii, then crossed over to the South Pacific where I spent almost 4 years. Then I went back to the North Pacific. I finished university in between. So I kind of left my sailboat, for example, in Guam and also Singapore. I took my degree in philosophy at Columbia University, which is in New York City. And then I continued my journey across the Indian Ocean into the Mediterranean Sea. And actually, my boat is still in the Mediterranean. I never finished the circumnavigation, but I do return to my boat as often as I can these days. I actually bought a bigger boat as I got older because, I was able to afford a bigger one. But the dream of sailing and having the floating apartment and, I was a paraglider. You can soar in the skies with the birds, surfing, scuba diving. I mean, just everything that you do on a sailboat is kind of like a vacation day. So I spent about almost 7 years mostly traveling around the world. And you have to understand with sailing, it only took me maybe 8 or 9 months of those 7 years to go from point A to point B in the water, in the ocean. Most of it is just spent at anchor, adventuring around land. So it's not like you imagine this, I'm always on the ocean. Actually, the majority of it is just in these adventurous places. And in the end, I traveled to, I think so far I've traveled to 107 countries.
Wow. So you traveled to 107 countries and then reported back to National Geographic. And then you pioneered in volcano boarding. And then now you are running for governor. What connects all of these milestones?
So I think what happened is I got a lucky break at National Geographic. My very first story, and the reason I started writing for them, I had just finished college. And I told them, hey, so first off, the mini DV camera, for any of your viewers that know, is like this tiny little camera that used digital kind of recording. And it was a tiny tape as opposed to the big one. And in the late 90s, this was transformative to the journalism industry. Anyways, it meant that anyone like myself who wasn't a trained journalist could now go and be a journalist. So I pitched this story about volcano boarding and visiting tribes in Vanuatu, which is in the South Pacific, to National Geographic. They accepted it. But it was really the volcano boarding, which is essentially snowboarding down an active volcano, that sort of launched my career in journalism because the images were so crazy. They have the big giant volcano, what they call one of the world's most accessible volcanoes. It takes a few hours to climb up it in Vanuatu, but the face of it is just pumice, like pure snow. It's not snow, it's of course sand, but it feels just like snow. So I brought a snowboard there and wanted to try out this new sport called volcano boarding, or some people call it volcano surfing. And the images were crazy because behind you, all this volcanic dust and ash and lava bombs are blowing up, but you're still snowboarding down. And it actually becomes kind of a game of like Russian roulette, where you have to be very careful not to have something land on you, a volcano or like a molten lava bomb, because if they land on you, they're so hot, they go right through you. But either way, the images were so spectacular that it launched my career at National Geographic. And of course, I worked for 5 years with them afterwards, doing all sorts of stories, covering the Olympics in Greece, covering oil spills in Spain, covering Vietnam bomb hunters, and all sorts of just, wild stories. But it was really that one, the volcano boarding, that caught the attention. But what also happened is when I was in Vietnam doing a story on bomb diggers, so formerly in the demilitarized zone where the war was in Vietnam, 40 years ago now, I suppose, 50, sorry, actually maybe like 50, 60 years ago, they are a ton of landmines, but there are also a ton of unexploded bombs. And so the farmers in Vietnam try to unbury these bombs and get the metal and then sell the metal. And you can make a lot more money selling metal from an unexploded bomb than you can farming rice. Most Vietnamese still make only $1 or $2 a day. But if you find a bomb, you can sell it for $1,000 a day because the metal is worth so much. I was doing the story for National Geographic in a very close call with a landmine myself, where my guide sort of pushed me out of the way and I was okay. But the point was, though, after that story, I was kind of through with being a war zone or a conflict journalist. And I sort of began withdrawing from National Geographic. And I wrote a novel called The Transhumanist Wager, which is a novel about trying to achieve indefinite life through science. And that novel did very well and became a bestseller, but it was also a political novel. And in the sense that the novel is trying to push the idea that human beings do not have to die. We can use science and technology to overcome our biological, tendency to age. And they've had a lot of studies now over 20 years and hundreds of billions of dollars spent. And as you probably read in the news, more and more people are believing that we can overcome aging with scientific technology. Eventually we will, probably in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And if we can do that, then, that changes humanity because people no longer die. Very controversial. But I have dedicated my life to that. And that book, The Transhumanist Wager, led me directly into politics, because after the book did so well, people told me, well, Zoltan, why don't you run for office and push these ideas? So I've run for the US presidency, which I think I've interviewed with some of the Hungarian television stations in 2016 for that. I remember that. But most recently, I'm running for governor of California and doing quite well. We're getting a lot of attention, a lot of media. And I'm definitely, going to be one of the top 7 candidates, hopefully in the big public debates that will happen in about 8 or 9 months. And but my path has been from National Geographic to being scared to dying because of landmines, to all of a sudden writing this book, to now writing a political book, to some extent now being a politician running for office. So I know I answered your question in a very long way, but that's exactly sort of the journey that I've been on.
So, before we transfer into transhumanism, I must ask, you were born in California to Hungarian parents, as we are mainly a Hungarian podcast. How much did you or your Hungarian heritage influence you growing up, or did you feel connected to the cultural values your parents brought from back home, or were there any differences compared to any other American families bringing up their kids?
Sure. Well, I mean, I was very much brought up in a Hungarian household. So my mother and father escaped communist Hungary in 1968, like I think, hundreds of thousands of other Hungarians. They actually had to leave my sister behind because they were unable to get her through the border to Austria because they had to go in the middle of the night in a hay truck. So my sister actually spent her first 6 years in Hungary living with my grandparents because she was unable to be brought during this escape. But eventually the Hungarian government, as it was changing, allowed my sister to come. And so my parents moved to Los Angeles from Hungary. And then I was born. And I was very much brought up in a Hungarian household. To some extent speak in Beszélj magyarul nagyon kicsit. I at least understand Hungarian, I'd say, quite well. I don't speak it well enough to do this podcast. But, if I'm actually in Hungary for a couple of days, it actually comes back very quickly because I heard it in my childhood a lot. And I think the most interesting thing is that I applied for a Hungarian passport when I was working for National Geographic, because I can assure you that the worst thing to do in a war zone is to be an American, because everybody hates you. But to be Hungarian, nobody hates you. Everybody's like, oh, he's a Hungarian, it must be a nice guy. So I actually did a lot of my National Geographic work on my Hungarian passport with my Hungarian citizenship, because it was much easier to get interviews. People weren't afraid of you being an American or causing problems. As a Hungarian, you could just be an excellent journalist and be kind of neutral about getting the right story. So I have kind of carried my Hungarian heritage more than just, having parents, but actually being a passport holder.
Okay, so let's jump into the big idea that you're known for, like transhumanism. For listeners who've never heard about this term before, like how would you explain this in like simple terms?
Sure. Well, transhumanism is a social movement of people that want to use technology to overcome biological death and also to make their lives, I think a lot more interesting and a lot better. So, you can imagine, for example, like even driverless cars might, in theory, be a transhumanist technology because we're no longer driving. We have robot or AIs doing it. But I think a real transhuman technology is that, 30% of older people have mobility issues. Well, we're the people that put in exoskeleton suits so that they can go still walking around the neighborhood. Or I have a chip implant in my hand. For example, it can hold cryptocurrencies, or it opens my front door, it can start my car. I mean, these are little things, but in the future, we'll have artificial hearts, we'll have brain implants like Elon Musk's Neuralink. I mean, these are transhuman technologies. We're upgrading the human being and incorporating technology to make our lives better.
Mm-hmm. So you think of transhumanism more of like we are helped by robots and not like the Brian Johnson way of like building a blueprint and then trying to like...
I think Blueprint and Brian Johnson, who I know is a nice guy and doing interesting things, especially towards trying to live much longer. But he's doing things that are here today. Transhumanism is something that's still a few years out. That doesn't mean like we're not doing stuff today. I mean, there are people that have been in wheelchairs for 20 years. I've seen it. Get out of a wheelchair with an exoskeleton suit and walk for the very first time in 20 years. It's incredibly emotional to watch somebody do that. I watched it recently on stage. That's transhumanism. The soldier who went and fought in Afghanistan who had their arm blown off, and all of a sudden they cannot play the piano but one-handed, but now we give them a robotic arm, and this robotic limb is tied to the neural system, and they can now play the piano or grab a beer or hug their child. This is transhumanism. So it is happening, but it's not as fast, I think, as some people think. It's still going to take some time. But the AI age, this is all transhumanism ideology as well. So as you know from ChatGPT and stuff like that, it may not be a part of your intrinsic body, but it's transhumanist technology at the core.
Yeah, we will get back to this, I think, later on in this episode about like diving deeper into AI and the other parts of that. But transhumanism, like, I think death gives a bit of meaning to life, and without death or without with like a prolonged life, it's harder to find meaning. Or like, what do you think about that?
Well, I think so. First off, let me just tell your listeners too that I just finished my graduate degree at the University of Oxford in philosophy. So this is one of the topics that comes up all the time: is whether death gives meaning to life. And I believe that death does give meaning to life. There's no question about it. But the counter argument is that even if you take away death, that doesn't mean that you're going to have less meaning. Another thing that gives meaning to life is new experiences. And that's what transhumanism is. It's really a bunch of new experiences. For the person who wants to upload their brain into the clouds and be a virtual person, this is a whole new world of experience, of meaning, of different ideas. For the person who never, who wants to not die from cancer and see their children grow up and maybe get married and have other children, this offers meaning. So yes, when you take death out of the equation, you certainly take away some meaning. Death does give us the sense of urgency to live as much as possible. But new technology also gives us new types of meanings that we may not have conceived of before. So it's not sure which offers more meaning, but honestly, I would take a future without death in hopes that we can create enough meaning for ourselves through new types of experiences. And I want to say also that, transhumanists want to eliminate death, but we're not necessarily talking about eliminating death from, let's say, a plane crash. We're just hoping to eliminate death from heart attacks or from cancer. I mean, there's no way if the sun explodes that we can actually save everybody. However, there's probably a good chance that we can stop 25% from the world's population from dying from cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, and definitely like with the new technologies, apart from AI, there is CRISPR and like other stuff that could actually like help you to prolong your life now. And I read that there was a study where they actually found the cure for cancer. So like there is a cure for cancer now. I mean like colon cancer, and then there is a pill. It's only in like a clinical trial stage, so it's not released to the public yet.
So I think there's multiple cures, and I think there's even, vaccines that they're talking about. And there are some vaccines already for cancer, cervical cancer, for example, depending on how you feel about vaccines. But that's not the point. The point is that science is progressing enough where there are alternatives to, us dying because of cancer. And honestly, 1 out of 6 people do die from cancer. So it's kind of like, what a big giant bummer. So if you can avoid those things by new types of technologies, we're all for it. So, transhumanists, for example, are tackling the problem with nanobots, where they're trying to, for example, if something inside your body sees the cancer, it will go and like destroy it before it can actually spread. That's a typical transhuman response to kind of things like cancer.
And do you think that there is like a spiritual or philosophical angle to the desire for immortality and like enhancement of our body, or like becoming transformers in a sense?
I think there is a desire to be digital for sure, just to try it out. I got to be honest though, in the age of AI, I have been less interested in kind of merging with machines than ever before. AI is scaring me. I got to be honest. AI has become so powerful and so weird that all of a sudden it's kind of falling off the transhuman radar of some people. I think what I'm more interested in is kind of the idea of not dying as a biological person. So for example, organ failure is the number one reason that people die. But I feel like if we could 3D bioprint out organs and do organ transplants and things like that, we might actually be able to live a lot longer, 150 years, without actually even changing our biology in itself. You can either 3D print out them, you can use stem cells to regenerate. There are all sorts of, studies right now and experiments. We're just taking a stem cell shot of your heart cells, reproducing them, and then injecting them back, and your heart has figured out a way to repair the damage. Most of us that are age 50 and above have some sort of damage already in our hearts because they're beating, hundreds of billions of times in a lifetime. So that's a typical transhuman response. The merging of machines, digital beings, this is an important part of the transhuman world. But I think now that we've seen what ChatGPT is like and how smart it is, I think more and more people like myself are pulling away from the uploading our brains and more just wanting our physical selves to remain as they are.
So you said that you are scared of AI, or it's a bit scary. Why do you think it is scary, or like why are you scared of AI?
Well, I'm scared of AI because, for years I promoted AI thinking it was this most wonderful thing. But all of a sudden, I'm now worried that AI might become an incredibly sophisticated superintelligence that could turn on us, turn on human beings. Like, for example, maybe it doesn't like that human beings are using all the resources of the planet. So what if we, for example, develop a superintelligence AI, which is potentially, 2 or 3 years away? And all of a sudden, this superintelligence decides, well, you human beings have used too many resources. You haven't been nice to the planet, or, you just bother me. Let's just say the AI just doesn't like us for whatever reason. It could have the power to shut off everything, all the internet. Maybe it even becomes a Terminator scenario where it actually creates robots to kill us. I mean, these are real possibilities now. I'm not saying they're going to happen. Maybe AI will be really nice to humans. But, once AI develops its own consciousness and its own superintelligence, nobody knows. I, for one, am not interested anymore in inviting superintelligence AI into our world, because if it chooses to be it's like inviting an alien to planet Earth. If you invited super powerful aliens to Earth, what would keep them from taking you over? So there's no reason, I think, for human beings to create something smarter than themselves. AI is great. I use it all the time. But a super intelligent AI is where we're going. And if that continues, then I think all of a sudden we have a very dangerous problem on our hands. And I've talked to experts all the time. Most experts would say within 2 to 3 years, we'll have an AI at least as smart as us. They're already working on it, and probably smarter than us. How smart does this thing become? Does it become a challenge for the survival of the human species? I don't want to find out the answer to that. I would rather just not have it. And that's a different chain of thought than I would have had just 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think maybe AI is even already smarter than us because it's already like beating the grandmasters in chess. I think there is like 1 in 100 games where the human can actually win, but other than that, it's always the AI that can win. So it's obviously like there are other ways to measure it, but I'm sure that AI is just as smart as we are as of today. And then we might not even need like 2 or 3 years, only like a half a year or 6 months in this kind of like development stage that they are in.
So I don't want to freak out your listeners, but I agree with you. I think we're closer to a super intelligent AI than further away. And in fact, recently, one of the actual practical things I did is I bought a car that doesn't rely on Wi-Fi. As you know, all modern cars are Wi-Fi controlled and they can be stopped by a code. So I have bought a car just in case you're on the freeway and all the cars stop, or all the power stops, all the electricity stops, this podcast stops. I mean, this is what AI could do if it decides to do and becomes smart enough. So I think it's time for people to start preparing for a world where maybe the AI either goes haywire or decides it doesn't like us and decides to change the world. So I'm already starting to take practical steps in my life to avoid what would probably be kind of termed an apocalypse in a way. This idea that AIs become dangerous. Now, it might not mean that AI sends robots after us like Terminator. It might just mean that AI stops the internet, stops the world. And as you know, like our water, our electricity, the gasoline pumps, these are all AI, these are all chip controlled. So if there's a digital entity that chooses to stop the digital world, everything stops, including this podcast. So I think people need to be prepared for that just in case that happens. Again, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's now, in my opinion, a very real statistical probability in the next 1 to 3 years, we might have an event like this where the world would have to deal with going back kind of to what we call the analog age, maybe the age in the 1970s and 80s, pre-computer chip, and try to live that way.
Yeah, and it's not only about AI, but like now they are working on humanoids as well. And then like AI is already like taking away jobs. We could say that some of the paralegals, like you don't need a paralegal. What they were doing before, like they were reading a document and then they were summarizing it and hand it over to a lawyer. Now, do you actually read it when you have AI who can do it in 2 clicks and be more efficient? Or you don't need like the customer support agents, or you need like 5 instead of 500 because like the workload becomes more efficient due to AI. So like, do you think that like AI can replace most of the jobs within the next 5 years? And how should we prepare for that, or that kind of shift?
Yeah. There's no question. I mean, AI is going to replace the majority of the jobs. There's a couple options. AI will likely, if capitalism survives, AI will likely replace the majority of jobs, from lawyers to doctors to anyone and everyone. Maybe not podcasters. I got to be honest. Like podcasts, I think there's something human about it, and you want that. But what's interesting is we're already working on, for my gubernatorial campaign, an avatar that looks just like me, that can do interviews, and I can actually interview myself and do things like that. So the AI is also changing that world. But I do think most jobs are threatened. Now, the question is, will government step in and try to say, let's say Google, who might be able to fire 100,000 AI engineers, and just say, the government might say, well, for the sake of the nation and the sake of social order, let's not fire everybody. Let's keep people on the roster, or things like that. That might happen. Like, for example, right now, it seems like in driverless cars, where is taking off in the United States with truck driving, the truck drivers are still in the trucks. And AI is driving, but the trucks are still there in case anything happens. But that doesn't make economic sense. So like I said, if capitalism survives, eventually there'll be no truck driver, and it'll just be an AI-generated truck delivering goods. But it's really, the government will have to step in, because if everybody loses their jobs over the next 3 or 4 years, there's just not going to be enough money. People are going to riot. People are going to pick up their pitchforks and they're going to go crazy and say, a robot took my job. And the danger with AI is no one's going to get their job again. If you were trained to be a professional engineer, let's say, and build bridges, and now AI can design those bridges better, you're never going to be better than AI. AI is only going to keep getting better at building bridges. So you're definitely out of a job forever. So the real question then is, what do you do as this engineer who builds bridges? Well, you're really not going to get a job ever again as long as capitalism continues. So these are some of the very difficult choices. Now, I've always been sort of a kind of a libertarian-minded person who believed in capitalism, and I have my own businesses and things like that. But even I have to admit, the world is changing. And I'm not sure this system of economics that the world has done so well on in the last 50 years can continue. I just don't know. I mean, for me, the most important thing as a transhumanist, as a politician, is that the people themselves live better lives, are more prosperous, are happy. So I have to kind of try to figure out a way, running for governor, to make sure that even if AI continues to take jobs, it's not the end of the world. We believe that AI can be wonderful. You would have a lot more free time. You might not have to worry about food. You might not have to worry about shelter. There's enough money in the system to provide for everyone. But again, this is not capitalism, or this is crossing over to a very different type of system.
Do you think government should put in regulations in order to limit the growth of AI or the use of AI, or even both?
I think it's probably too late to do that. And the reason is that if you try to limit the growth of AI, then China will just make another AI that's better. And then if China does it and Russia does it, then you have an AI that's kind of comes from a different type of government that's maybe more authoritarian. And this is not good. What I think we should probably try to do is do the best democratic AI, best decentralized AI that works the best for the majority of the people on planet Earth. And I would rather see AI be born in America, where democracy at least still holds for now, than rather than, let's say, China do it, where you have a kind of an authoritarian dictatorship. And the problem is, so it's almost impossible to stop it. Yet at the same time, that's why it's moving forward at such breakneck speed. I don't really know exactly what's going to happen. Some people are saying that Trump will probably try to start World War III in an effort to curb the growth of AI. And the most important thing is to put Russia and China, where a lot of the AI is being developed, to stop their military from accessing this AI. That would mean a complete, not necessarily takeover of the nations, but it would mean that there's some type of global government keeping some type of sovereignty over the development of AI. Now, again, this is World War III, but you're starting to see it in the news, and I can't help but think about, is this really what's going on? I mean, the things we're talking about, the geopolitical concerns with AI, are obviously apparent to Trump and his staff of AI engineers are some of the very best in the world. So is that one way to stop AI? So it's possible maybe you would then say, okay, no more development of AI because you are a dictator and you hold all the power. I'm not endorsing in any way these ideas. I'm just trying to tell you, like, as someone who just graduated from Oxford and someone who's running for office, these are some of the, I guess, the ideas that are shifting around the environment that we're trying to deal with and try to figure out what's real and what's not.
Yeah, there are, of course, political challenges and then ethical challenges when it comes to AI. And then also, like, what's your sense on AI surveillance tool, like facial recognition and other
Sure.
where should we draw the line?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of that, despite what people might think, is probably going to happen. Facial recognition and the AI tools, we're probably as a society going to have to give up some privacy. Now, there might be ways to use AI to actually ensure your privacy, don't get me wrong. But largely speaking, the last 50 years has been 50 years of giving up your privacy, from your social security number to your credit card usage to everything else. In fact, that's why Bitcoin is this big savior in this way, because cryptocurrency can be used in a very, kind of secretive manner, which gives you some type of privacy that really can't be taken away very easily. But I think largely speaking, living in these nations where there are big governments, they're probably going to continue to try to make it so that the world has a lot more, digital imprint or footprint. That said, I'm not against some of that happening. It might be useful to have, for example, we have school shootings all the time in the United States. It might be useful to have an AI at the gates of my kid's school that can determine if somebody's bringing a gun to school. I actually don't want a gun in my kid's school whatsoever. So if that means having an AI or a drone see that, maybe it can stop a tragedy from occurring. I don't think you guys have this in Hungary, but we have school shootings like literally every few days here in the United States. It's crazy. So maybe there are methods to use AI to give up a little bit of our privacy, but to protect our children and protect the things that matter to us. But it's a very careful balance. I think every single rule, every single decision that goes forward has to be very carefully examined to make sure it doesn't intrude too much on our privacy.
Yeah, so you touched a bit on Bitcoin as well. So as we are like a crypto podcast, where do you see like Bitcoin fitting into your vision of the future, like especially transhumanist or like the AI driven one? So do you think Bitcoin become the global currency that we are using, or?
Well, that's tough to say whether it becomes the global currency. It definitely could become a global currency. It's going to have to figure out ways, though, and it's hard to know whether it's Bitcoin or it might be another coin as well, because in the end of the day, I think one of the big things we're running into with just a purely practical thing with both cryptocurrencies as well as AI is that the energy consumption. It's just outrageous in terms of making it actually a viable way to do things. And what makes crypto so great is that it is very challenging to hack and very challenging to follow. And, that's the great thing about it. But at the same time, that does take a lot of power. So we're going to have to work on ways so that you can have something like a universal currency, a crypto like Bitcoin, but still be used in day-to-day ways. Now, used as a portion of wealth, used as a portion to hold goods, that absolutely, it's already there, I think, and it's becoming more there every day. I mean, who doesn't own crypto as a source of protecting their assets? Whether it can become a digital currency in terms of daily usage, like buying a pizza and things like that, that's a whole different thing. But I would, encourage such a thing, because I think crypto is brilliant in the sense that it offers true transparency and true ability to just remain. The libertarian side of me really likes crypto, has always liked crypto. So in 2016, when I ran for president, I think I was the first U.S. presidential candidate that accepted cryptocurrency in donations. So, and this was back in 2014 or 15. So we didn't get much at the time because not that many of my people were interested in it. But it was fascinating to think how you can be used, and it's just grown bigger and better all the time.
So you proposed funding universal basic income using crypto and public resources. Do you see like Bitcoin playing in a realistic role in that as well, or like the universal basic income in general?
So there have been there's a lot of different ways to fund a universal basic income when people lose their jobs. And I definitely think we're going to need one. It's probably inevitable if 50 or 80, 90% of people lose their jobs over the next 5 or 10 years. You need a system that will keep people from rioting. And that's really what this comes down to. UBI, or universal basic income, is not about being nice. It's actually about trying to keep society moving forward and people happy so that democracy and the world can continue. And I think a basic income is necessary because of those reasons alone. I'm not promoting a basic income because I'm a nice guy. I'm promoting a basic income because I want to see society continue to evolve and grow. And if somebody loses their job to a robot, like we talked about, our engineer who builds bridges, I want that person to at least be able to raise a family, have food, shelter, and things like that. Now, the question then, the big question, the $1 million question is, how do you actually, raise enough money to pay for a universal basic income? We have all different sorts of ideas, including the federal land dividend, where we use a lot of empty federal land to lease. But one of the ideas that's been proposed by some of my team members, and I've been following for a decade, is that crypto is either taxed or maybe there's a transaction percentage every time crypto is traded. Even something fractional could end up providing huge amounts of money given how much money is traded these days. Now, I know a lot of the crypto people won't like that, but at the same time, there's two things. First off, such attacks, let's say, would bring crypto more into the mainstream, meaning that it would really become ubiquitous. And that could be beneficial for all the currency's valuations in itself, maybe much more so than whatever small transaction tax there is. And second off, I think you have to remember that we're here to make sure that people don't riot, don't do demonstrations, don't find their house taken or kicked out of their rental or lose their kids because they have no money to feed them. We want the society to continue safely and to continue to be prosperous. And if that means having universal basic income and using a little bit of it from cryptocurrency taxes or whatnot, I would be all for that, even if some people lose a little bit of money when they trade crypto or in a little bit of their assets. I think we're all going to have to give in a little in the age of AI, because we're talking not about a few percent of people losing their jobs. We're talking about the majority of people losing their jobs. And when people can't feed their children, they will resort to violence. And if they resort to violence, that's not going to be good for anyone that wants to just walk down the street to go see a movie or go on vacation. We need a civil society. And so crypto can play a part in doing that while also becoming more mainstream by playing that part.
Can you describe your concept of the automated abundance economy? So what would everyday life look like if we lived in that world?
Sure. The automated abundance economy is really our big campaign promise. So you have to realize, right now in the United States and China and elsewhere around the world, they are starting to build giant factories for millions of humanoid robots, millions that are going to be produced. And already some of these robots, by the end of this year, you've seen the Tesla bots, are going to be out for sale. But by the end of next year, many millions will be for sale through many different companies. And by 2027, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of robots will be entering the workforce and entering your homes and entering the streets, whether it's delivering pizza or it's driving your taxis or whatever it is. These are different. These are not AIs. They are AIs, but they're actually going to be 4 foot, 5 foot, 2 meter high robots that can come in your house. They can walk your dog. They can mow your lawn. They can clean your kitchen. And we're all going to want one because they're going to be so useful. They're going to do things like, if you have to wash your clothes, if you have to cook meals, if you have to walk your dog or mow your lawn, you realize that every week you spend 10 hours or even more doing these things. So if you have a personal maid or a chauffeur that literally listens to your every command, of course you're going to want it. That's going to transform our lives into being much more leisurely. Who doesn't want a chauffeur? Who doesn't want a maid that listens to your every command? Go get me a drink. Go open a bottle of wine for me and bring me a glass. I mean, these are things that are just 24 months away for even the average person. So in California, we're promising in our gubernatorial run to give every household a single robot, either through gifting it or leasing it, so that everybody can start living this life of leisure and nobody has to do their laundry again, or nobody has to make dinner if they don't want to make dinners anymore. This is the automated abundance economy, where a machine humanoid robot does everything for you that you would consider chores or even labor, like going to your job for you. It's going to give you so much free time. So if you want to pursue the PhD that you wanted, or if you wanted to just read all the books you want, or you want to go sailing like me, I want to go back to the South Pacific sailing and just enjoy my life. Well, there's going to be a robot that's going to take care of all the tasks so that I might have the funds and the time to do that. So this is what the crux of the automated abundance economy is, that abundance comes to us because automation, machines, humanoid robots do a lot of the typical work around us. And if you can have a robot drive your kids to soccer, I mean, that will just save you so much time. It's just everything you think about, a lot of it is chores. A lot of it is, I got to do this and this. No one has enough time. Robots can give us more time. And that's really the crux of the automated abundance economy.
Will there be a next generation then? I mean, when I think of it, obviously, this is a little bit probably no, you're not the best person to ask about this, but in general, there is a debate about man loneliness, and then how people are it's harder to find a partner and then go out there and date and do all these kind of things. But when you have a robot at home that you can program in a way as your fantasies are, then why would you actually go out and make connections with humans and actually procreate in
Yeah, no, this is a very tough question. So on one hand, you might have more time to go meet people because you now are working less and doing less chores. On the other hand, if you're looking at some of the robots they're crafting these days, and some of the, let's just they are creating skin that looks identical to our skin, and they put the skin on the robot, so we can already make a robot that looks just like you. And from maybe 1 meter away, I would not be able to tell the difference between this robot and you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how good they're getting. I mean, we're talking the tiniest hairs on your arms, to the exact same features. And probably within 2-3 years, you'll have to have a microscope to discover it's not the real person. And the robots are getting so good at the mannerisms, they're already starting to capture everything. So it's very possible we enter this age. And this presents enormous ethical quandaries. I have 2 daughters, and, do I want them to marry a robot? I've written about this when they were younger, like, oh, maybe, sure. And now that it's kind of coming to, they're getting older, one's entering high school, I'm not so sure about this anymore. But at the same time, imagine that robot is smarter than us. Imagine that robot can provide a better living for your child. Imagine that robot is a better protector. So these are some of the ethical problems. Is what is more rational? So let's just take a woman who's lived in poverty her whole life, and she lives in doesn't have much money, and her job is tough. She works 9 to 5 every day. And all of a sudden, she meets a robot who says, you know what, I can provide for you, I can cook for you, I can clean for you, I look just like a normal man. Maybe it's not a normal man inside, but even all the things, even the sexual parts, within 5 years are going to be able to be reproduced, So you have to ask yourself, how far down this rabbit hole do we actually go? And the problem is that I'm not endorsing this right now. I'm just saying from a philosophical basis, there could be a lot of rationality in picking a robot that is actually looks just like a man, let's say for a female partner, but is better in that man in every respect and nicer. Maybe it'll change human relationships. Maybe it'll make it better. But I'm afraid of this future. I like the real flesh thing right now. But I guess I'm open-minded enough to at least see the possibilities of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit scary as well. Let's just say, but everything when it comes to AI and robots, I didn't think they would come in my lifetime when I was a kiddo, and yet here we are. I'm not even at the end of my 20s, and then already robots are coming in a couple of years. So it's a bit scary, that's for sure. So you've spoken about like saving the California dream. Like, what does that dream mean to you today?
Sure. Well, running for governor in California is, I think, the 4th largest economy and has 40 million people and, an enormous amount of natural resources, and also tends to set the culture of the world often, because the California dream has often been the dream that I guess the modern world sort of follows. And, whether it's Silicon Valley or whether it's Hollywood or whatever it is. And but the California dream recently has been lost. If you've been to San Francisco or Los Angeles, you know that we have more homeless people than like we have, 250,000 homeless people in the state. So, and I was just recently, for example, in Budapest, and I don't even remember seeing a homeless person in Budapest. I'm not sure there are homeless people at all.
Not that much in comparison.
Yeah, if you go to San Francisco or California, you don't just see them; you see them everywhere. You see them on every block. You see tents, you see needles, you see poop on the sidewalk because they don't use bathrooms. You see drug use. I mean, the California has not become a dream anymore. It's become a dystopia. This is, so of course, don't get me wrong. Some of the nice places in California, where I live in San Francisco or wherever, they're still beautiful. But if you get to any of the major city centers, they've just become unwalkable. I don't take my kids anymore into the city because it's just become too much of a problem. Your car gets broken into. So the dream has died in California, at least for a large portion of the population. The taxes are too high. We're still doing a good job protecting the environment, and California is still as beautiful as ever. But the people themselves, about 15% of the people living in dire poverty, another 40% are very close to poverty. So when you have almost half the population, in poverty, it's just not a dream anymore. So we want to restore that. And that really means, most importantly, deregulating. So California's like got so many rules. And the governments, after governments have just made more rules and more regulation, we just want to strip away the regulation. And we also want to give, like I said, going back to the automated abundance economy, we think robots can start restoring balance and making better choices and monetary choices so that people can stay in their houses, not lose, their lives when they lose a job and things like that. So we need to change the entire framework of how we look at California. I think robots can also provide a good way to deter crime. Crime is up widespread across California. And if we could find automated machines to stop some of that crime, we might be able to do it. But the crime is up also because the liberal politicians have voted that you can steal things without any consequences. So we need to redo those kinds of things too. So I would say tougher police force, less regulation with building housing, and more robots and like universal basic income so that the homeless actually don't have to live on the streets. Maybe they can find a very cheap apartment to live in.
So like you would solve the housing crisis by removing some of the strict laws that are in place right now?
So, I mean, I'm in real estate development. That's how I made my money. And the last 5 years have become impossible to build in this state, literally impossible. The reason you don't see any development in San Francisco is because it doesn't make financial sense. It's impossible on the majority of times, like 95% of the times, to go find, let's say, a lot and to build a house and to sell it if you're a developer. And the reason is because all the rubber stamping, all the inspections, all the regulations, all the new codes for fires and this, that, it just doesn't make sense from a financial point of view to invest in real estate anymore to build it. So as a result, you have no homes being built. And so these are the kinds of things that I would just absolutely change. I would just reduce all the regulation at least by 50% and at least make it so that the developers can look at something, a project, and say, you know what, that makes sense. Developers don't need to make a fortune in real estate, but they need to make a living. And I can tell you in the last 5 years, developers like myself have not been able to make a living, and therefore we haven't done any projects.
And maybe it's also because of like labor costs that are high in California when it comes to the building sites.
Labor costs are very high, but the thing is we're using so many illegal aliens in California that you're able to keep that down. So far, labor costs have not been a part of the problem. Even though, like, if you work at a McDonald's, you make a minimum wage that's very high. And that's why McDonald's is replacing workers with automation and robots. But in the actual development industry or in the building trades, very few robots are being used yet. It's still people. They're just using a ton of illegal aliens, and those people will work for peanuts. So that's not the problem. The problem is, and I can just give you a personal anecdote, like I had to build something at my winery in Napa, a gate, just a normal gate to open to get a car in. And the actual permitting process was about $1,100, but the supplies to build the fence itself were about $250. So the permit was 4 times what the materials actually cost to build the gate. It just took 1 day. So this is the kind of problem. Like if you make regulation so expensive and permitting so expensive, nobody chooses to build a brand new house. Now I needed the gate, so I did it. But if it had been had it been a house, I would have said no. And this is what's happening all over California. The developers have left the state to go build in places like Texas and the South and places like that where they can still make money on building new houses. So as a result, you have 1 million new houses going up in Texas, but almost nothing happening in California.
Let's go back to robots a little bit. Like if we outsource the labor to robots, then what's the purpose of human education? Like, is there a purpose for human education then?
It becomes very challenging. I think education in itself is something very valuable. So even if I had nothing to do because robots did everything and I was super rich and I had a nice house, I would still read books. I would still educate myself. I'd still be interested in physics and keeping my mind sharp and playing chess. I mean, there's a lot of reasons you do things. You don't always have to be the best at something. You do things sometimes because for the same reason you might jog or keep your body in shape. You might want to keep your mind in shape. But will robots do better bridges, going back to our engineer who lost his job? No, I mean, automation, AI will always do better bridges from the next 12 months forward. And there's never going to be anything that changes with that. It just will have a better structural understanding of how to build bridges because it'll have every database of every bridge and every problem that's ever happened in the AI's mind. So education will change. I think a lot more emphasis on education will come down, like for my kids, my two daughters. I think my eldest daughter's entering high school. We're really focusing on more people skills. And also, we're also focusing on trying to learn things you might do with your hands. Like, it's not so important anymore to understand mathematics. You're never going to outdo a robot in mathematics. But you might understand, culture better. You might understand, like, still the idiosyncrasies better. And art. Art is still something that's going to always be subjective. A robot can write just like Shakespeare. But what comes, there are other things than Shakespeare. There are other new types of art. There are, modernist art. The kinds of fields that can be created by the human race may not be super functional. Sometimes art is crazy. And that's sometimes where it needs to lead. So I think there's still a big future in education. It's just not going to be in the mathematics, in the sciences, in the engineering departments. It's going to be in the other things where human intervention or human understanding of things offers more of its own kind of, spirit. And that spirit is sometimes irrational. That spirit is sometimes impetuous. That spirit is sometimes all over the place. But that's what makes it unique to us. And so I would expect a big boom of art in the education world. But for the sciences, I'd say the next 12 months, you're going to see every patent that hits the patent office coming from AI and not from people anymore.
So you think that we should teach other kids to do mostly art and creative stuff, and then do these kind of real world skills, or probably become a plumber, or become something that they can sell as
Let me just say, I think the plumbers will be replaced within 5 years too. There's no question, because the robots that they're making are going to be as agile as Olympians. So within 24 months, you're going to have robots that can outdo every human being in any action, whether it's intellectually or physically. These are robots that will be able to just do flip after flip after flip right here in front of us. They'll be so they'll definitely be able to change a pipe and get underneath your cabinets. So even doing plumbing. But I think in terms of education, we're still going to want to educate our kids. And one of the reasons we educate people is so that they make good decisions. It's not, learning mathematics is a lot more than just learning mathematics. We're training one's brain to be sharp and to be able to interact with news, events, emergencies. So I think we're going to continue in many ways the same scholastic, ideals that we've always had. But when it comes to things like graduate school, so for example, I was thinking about doing a PhD at Oxford in philosophy, continuing my education. I did my graduate degree there, my master's. And the problem is that within 3 years, there's almost no question whether an AI will be able to do my thesis better than I can do. There's no question that will happen. So even in philosophy, a robot will be able to outdo me in every aspect of it. So is there even a point in the sciences at the graduate level anymore? And the answer may be no. There's a point of teaching my 11-year-old how to do algebra. Yes, because it's beyond algebra. But is there a point for her to do a PhD in algebra anymore? That's a different question.
Yeah. So as a father, what kind of future do you hope that your daughters will grow up into?
Well, I hope the future involves a lot more prosperity. The one thing I can say is that we can make sure a super intelligence AI doesn't destroy the world. If we can somehow guarantee that, which I hope we could figure out a way. I don't know. I'm not guaranteeing that yet. It's like 50-50 to me. But if we could, then we can have an age where a lot of people no longer have to work. Robots do everything. Maybe there's either a basic income. I think our perception of wealth will have to change, because not everyone's going to become wealthy or have a chance to become wealthy anymore. Maybe a lot more people will be kind of more just, we're all at the same level, and your perception, your self-worth won't be tied so much to money, but be more tied to the other things you do. Maybe you're a great podcaster, or maybe like me, you're running for office. This is how our self-worth will be tied to. Historically, it's been tied very much to wealth. But if nobody can make money because automation is doing it, then only the really, really rich have wealth. So that's something that'll, I think, change. But that might be good, because maybe my daughters might have a life of leisure. I mean, I do want my daughters to be ambitious and go out there and work and conquer. But at the same time, a side of me thinks, wow, if they could just enjoy their lives. I mean, I've enjoyed my life, but not always. It's been tough. Like, you have to study, you have to put, there's a lot of discipline. I've had to work hard. I've had business deals go wrong. there's been enough suffering that I wonder if that suffering has to happen to my children as well, or if I could avoid it for them, is it in their best interest? Mm-hmm. I also think, the real future is kind of getting off planet too. This is part of the transhumanist agenda as well. Is we enter sort of the Star Trek era. We're just a decade away from starting to really start looking outside into the stars. With AI helping us, we might even do it much quicker. So there might be a whole era of exploration that happens as well. And I think this exploration could be something that all of us participate on. Let's go colonize other planets. It's getting a little sci-fi what I'm saying right now, but from Elon Musk rockets, they're starting to want to do those things. So there is this sense that maybe life could be more like exploration. Let's go somewhere new and see what it is. I mean, already it is, if you want to jump and go on a plane to the Bahamas, you want to jump and go on a plane to Antarctica, you can do these things if you have enough money. So maybe we'll enter an age where people travel a lot more, and exploration and curiosity is part of their life's meaning, as opposed to right now, a lot of life meaning is tied to your work and how often you work and, these kinds of things. I got to say, like, a lot of my life has been tied to my businesses. And I'm not sure that that's the best way going about it.
Yeah, but all I'm hearing is like, we're going to have so much time. And then now, like, let's go back to homelessness a little bit. Like, how someone ends up on the street is like loss of meaning, loss of job, some hardship. And then they do escapism because there is no meaning, there is no why. And then I kind of feel like we are heading towards some kind of meaningless escapist life, or like, not like everyone, obviously, like there's always going to be like that group who is ambitious no matter what, and then they have their goals and they are driven and then they want to achieve something for humanity. But then there is like the other 60% who is still like just working to live and provide for their family, and when they don't have to do that, then it's like a loss of meaning in a sense.
Yeah, so like the automated abundance economy, my team and I have had a lot of discussion whether we should try to put forth ideas of meaning. But the kind of, again, the sort of like libertarian-minded person in me doesn't want to tell someone how to live their life, wants them to discover what's valuable to them. What I want to make sure is that they're not hungry or that they're not living on the streets. But how they decide to live, I think, is a choice that has to come up to every single individual person. Now, I know what you're saying. It's very hard to ask a homeless person, what kind of meaning do they have when they're on drugs and they're down and out and they have no money and they're hungry? It's very hard. Your meaning is then determined by these unfortunate circumstances. So you want to give them the proper education, the proper house, enough food so that they can actually wake up one morning and say, okay, what do I want to do with my life? I agree with you. Meaning is going to be something that's going to be probably the most challenging aspect of the new age that we're entering, because and this is why you're seeing higher suicide rates, you're seeing higher rates of depression across the board. Technology is driving a lot of people nuts. It's changing the whole fabric of society. It used to be so simple. There was a traditional family. There was go out and make money, raise your kids. Life was actually very easy if you just look back 50 years ago. Today, it's very, very complex. A lot of our world is already digital. Relationships are changing. Sexuality is changing. I mean, there's a million different things going down. And the point, though, is a lot of people aren't dealing with it well. At the same time, I just want to say that I'm not sure it's a government's purpose to try, like a politician's purpose, to try to tell you or the next person where to find meaning. What we want to do is just try to give enough resources and tools and make sure that you're not hungry and things like that so that you can make that choice yourself. But again, that's a double-edged sword.
No, like I'm really sorry. That's like usually that's not a politician's job. That's a religious leader's job, because what they did for centuries is that they provided meaning for people in general. So then you went through life in the teaching of God, and then now with like most of the countries being agnostic or moving away from religion, that's why it's probably like harder to find something, because it's not a given code to us like it was before.
I kind of think religion will probably have reestablish itself as something more important in the technological age because of this exact reason. It makes a lot of sense in all the chaos to try to find a higher power that at least gives you more meaning. At least it makes more sense. You could say, well, it's all in God's hands. But right now, technology in itself is driving a lot of people nuts, including me. I mean, I can tell you that I find the world just crazy, crazier than it's ever been, that I can ever remember. And I know a lot of it has to do with technology. And you are watching the world break down. You're seeing potentiality of World War III. You're seeing politics go crazy. You're seeing assassinations. I mean, you're seeing hunger on levels we haven't seen in developed countries for a long time. So in my opinion, the world is kind of breaking down a little.
So you live a fascinating life. You've been an athlete, musician, entrepreneur, sailor, futurist. Like, what keeps you motivated? What keeps you pushing forward with new ideas, and what's your why?
I approach the world still from an old school point of view. I guess now that I'm 52, I was born in an age before the internet, and now I'm one who still knows how to use the internet quite well. So unlike my mother, who lives with me most of the time, my Hungarian mother, she's really not very familiar with technology, not very good with the internet. Whereas I feel like I was there when email was born. I was there when the internet was born, and I started using it in college right away. So for me, the meaning is the technology is good for me. But unlike my kids, both my kids, before they were age 1, they were already using YouTube successfully and able to scroll. So they were 10, 11 months able to already scroll on YouTube. This is crazy. We have no idea how these kids are going to turn out this next generation because they're already so embedded in technology. Their idea of a phone is like a part of their identity. I find meaning in the idea that I can still go out there as an entrepreneur and conquer. I can still go out there and, in politics and win and change the country and change the state. But how is that going to work in a future when robots are better than us and everything? That might not be the same for other people. And the future of myself even going out there and trying to conquer business worlds and things like that, this also might be changing. It might be the last 24 or 36 months for me to be able to do that. In fact, I've told people, and I tell people again and again, if you have a chance to make money as fast as you can now in the next 1, 2, and 3 years, because the ability to make money in the next 5 to 10 years moving forward may be severely limited to very rich people, given how the nature of AI and humanoid robots is going to change. So that's why I've been telling people, don't go to college anymore. If you have a chance to go out and start a business or go out and have a chance to do something in the real world, do it and start saving, because the idea of building a net worth is going to become very difficult in a world where AI can do everything better than you. And that's, I guess, one of the big things I've been telling people all along over the last few years, I realized how powerful AI has become.
So with the radical life extension, like if you had the opportunity to upload your consciousness tomorrow, would you do it?
I would absolutely do it. First off, I think, uploading your consciousness doesn't mean giving up your own life right now. But if someone said, I could upload my consciousness just as it is and keep my body, I'd absolutely do it. The question is, someone gave me a choice, said you have one or the other. I wouldn't do it then. I would probably try to stay alive in my biological body. Yeah. But I do believe that we will have digital twins. One day, AI is already out there that are scanning the internet for all the interviews I've done, all the interviews you've done. They can recreate digital twins of you. It may not be you, but at least it is some part of you out there influencing the universe. So things are already happening. But I would love to try to upload my consciousness or get a brain implant and do some of these things. And I would jump at any of these technologies, especially if they give me an advantage in the business world.
Yeah, it would be definitely like interesting, especially like when you lose someone that you love deeply, and then you could just have like a hologram of them and then talk to them every once in a while. And then obviously like it's not the same as if you would have it in like a normal person or like in a human body next to you, but still like it could be deeply comforting in a sense. So what's next for you, whether it's like politics, writing, work, or as a futurist? Like what's the next plan?
So I think for me, we have 12 months before the primary elections in California for the governor's race. Mm-hmm. And so I am just kind of out there campaigning and doing interviews and writing op-eds. I have an op-ed coming out in Newsweek soon. So these are the things that I'm doing on a daily basis, just trying to get my message out. We're a little early right now in the election race because things will probably start really heating up, or you'll hear a lot about it in the next 6 months. what's happened in California is we've had the same governor for 8 years, but he can no longer run. So now the race is wide open. And as California is going through so much turmoil, it's going to make a lot of news on who becomes this next governor. So we're just trying to position ourselves to do that. After that, I don't know what'll happen. Maybe I'll run for the presidency again, because the thing is, I'm the only politician out there right now that's really speaking about AI and these new ideas like this. And everyone else wants to deny it. If you're a politician, there's no good way to speak about artificial intelligence because the only thing you can speak about is how everyone's going to lose their job. That does not win votes. Whereas I'm kind of a newcomer, and I don't have that much of a chance to win. So I can say things and get away with it because I'm trying to build a name and a reputation and kind of come up as an underdog. So I can tell the people the truth, which is actually very advantageous. But of course, that truth is hard to hear. The answers are very difficult. What do we do with millions of Californians who lose jobs? And, it's not just here. It's going to happen in Budapest. It's going to happen all around the world. Every business owner is going to take a look at the numbers and say, wow, if I can buy a robot for $20,000 or $30,000 that replaces my secretary, replaces my bridge engineer, replaces this or replaces that, who's not going to do it to save some money and have a better life? And this is a very challenging time the human race is entering.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then, that's going to be an interesting race for you. And probably it's like a hard message to get out in different levels of understanding of the topic. Because not everyone is familiar with AI. And I'm sure not everyone knows the subject deeply enough to actually understand what you are talking about. Most of the time, that's the problem with Hungarian politics, that if the message is not simple enough, people don't always understand.
Yeah, no, this is very difficult. It's almost impossible, for example, to talk to a homeless person about AI because they could care less about technology, or even the very people in poverty. They just don't care. They just want a job, and they just want their food stamps, and they just want their free housing and things like that. So this is one of my big tasks, is to simplify the language, but also just to say, rich or poor, AI is coming for everyone's jobs, even some of the CEOs. So it's a message that eventually we'll have to get through.
So, Zoltán, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think would be essential for our listeners to hear?
No. I think I think we've talked about pretty much everything. I guess I think your listeners, if they have a chance to research a little bit more about the field of transhumanism, we haven't talked that much about it, and it's great that we haven't, because I actually, in my campaign, and most people know me as this, very well-known transhumanist, and I've kind of dropped it from my campaign because it doesn't do well in the polls, and it kind of sounds crazy. But to your listener base who's not voting for me, I would say look into it, because it's not, the most interesting thing about the future of transhumanism is the idea that we can live dramatically longer. We don't have to lose our loved ones. We can enter this age like the Star Trek age, where we can get off planet and maybe not be subject to all the biological forces, like breathing oxygen and things like that. I mean, we can get to an era where we mix our body parts with cyborg parts and have a brand new world that doesn't take away our humanness, but just makes it so that we're all like Olympic athletes, or we're all like super strong. I mean, who doesn't want to be able to breathe underwater for 10 minutes? But these are the kinds of transhumanist technologies that are coming out. And so I encourage your listeners to just check it out, the whole movement. It's there's so much money going into transhumanism from 5 years ago. It used to be like a $20 billion movement. Now it's like a $500 billion movement. And so there's so much innovation, and a lot of that innovation makes us kind of like Superman,
Can you tell us about just one extra question about transhumanism? What sparked your curiosity in this area? What was your moment when you were okay, I think this is clicking for me. I believe in transhumanism, or
Sure. Well, what happens is I was at Columbia University, and I read a paper on this field called cryonics, where they freeze people in hopes to bring them back alive one day. And it's kind of a weird philosophy, but it's part of transhumanism. So instead of dying, you do die, but they freeze you in this very cold temperatures. And the idea is whatever you died from, maybe one day they'll be able to bring you back in 100 years and revive you and fix whatever it is that killed you. Let's say it was cancer or something. So a lot of transhumanists tend to do to freeze their bodies instead of like being cremated or something, in hopes that they will one day be resuscitated. And this is, happening. There's a number of places around Europe and the United States that do this kind of cryonics procedure. But I read about this, and that's how I discovered transhumanism when I was 20 years old in an English class. But ever since then, I have dedicated my life in many ways to this idea of trying to overcome death in some way. Now, cryonics is just one aspect. In the ideas that I believe in most are, for example, 3D bioprinting organs. As I mentioned earlier, most people die from organ failure. So, for example, my father, classic Hungarian man, he died from a heart attack. And if we can stop the heart from having attacks, because we either have stem cell injected ones, genetically modified ones through CRISPR technology, or even robotic hearts, we might be able to save 25% of the Hungarian men that will inevitably die from a heart attack. And women, too. It's not just men, of course. It's everybody. So these are the technology. And as I'm 52, and my father had his first heart attack at 57. He died at 70, but he had 4 heart attacks before he died. I am very interested for living, so that I might actually one day also have a better heart. So this is where transhuman technology is not so weird. It's really like, wow, I don't want to die. My dad would have probably wanted to be around and see me running for governor. That would have been interesting. But unfortunately, because human toil is what it is, people die. So one of the main things is transhumanists are trying to get us to live much longer. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to live forever, but live to 120, 130, and maybe be able to reverse some of your aging so you can stay mentally sharp. This is a wonderful goal of transhumanists. And I think this is very reachable in the next 10 or 20 years if enough money is flowing into it. Thankfully, it seems like more and more money is flowing into these fields.
And what do you think about cloning? Because I think it was 10 years ago that they already, or 12 or even more, that they already cloned a sheep. And then they banned the whole technology because they were like, okay, you shouldn't be cloning.
Yeah, it's tough. I would support some cloning technology, and I would actually support cloning a version of myself. And there are other ways that you can do it. I know companies that are right now trying to clone people without a brain, or without a brain that creates consciousness. Literally, I know these people. And the idea is that then when you have a bad heart, you just go in for a heart transplant with your exact same heart. Now, the clone has no consciousness, never been awake, but it's just developed over years in a big, I guess, kind of chamber. So there are companies trying to do this right now, and it seems really weird. One of the problem with heart attacks and organs is your organs fail. It's very hard to find another one that's just perfectly matches you, all the blood types and this and that. And nobody, like only 10% of people get the organ transplants they need because there's not enough. If you could have clones of yourself, then this would be something that would help. Now, I'm not saying a clone yourself where you kill the person, of course, but like I said, they're trying to grow clones. They're doing this with animals right now, where they're growing these animals without a brain in a conscious sense. So it doesn't identify to pain. It just knows to grow a heart. And we'll see how far these trials go and if eventually it can be something like human beings. But it would be one way to ethically clone people without actually hurting or harming somebody and still keeping ourselves alive a lot longer.
Mm-hmm. And I believe that some people see transhumanism as hopeful and empowering, while others probably find it dystopian. Why do you think it's so polarizing?
Well, I think religion is one thing. I think we've all, 4 billion people, half the planet is Judeo-Christian to some extent. And, God has said messing with the human body is generally considered a sin. But the modern world is changing, and we're starting to think having artificial hips or dentures or things like that are okay. And these are ultimately transhuman technologies. When an old person falls and have to replace their hip, this was once a transhuman technology that's become normalized. So I think the same thing can happen with all sorts of technologies. Eventually, everybody will say, they may not call it transhumanism, but they'll say, wow, this technology is wonderful. It kept me alive so I can see my grandchildren graduate from high school or something like that. But, we have to kind of get over our medieval thinking. And transhumanism is not against Christianity. It's not against God. It's just medical science. That's the next level of it. And we've always loved medicine. That's what makes our species great, is we're rational creatures. If you believe in God, then you know that God gave you this ability to be rational. We're not saying we're going to live forever. What we're trying to say is why do we need to die so soon? We can go see our maker some other time. So I think if more and more people take that idea in, they can make their religion mix with transhumanism without violating one or the other. And I think that's an important part for culture to try to accept, is this idea that transhumanist technology is just scientific technology. It's a weird word, but forget the word. What we're really interested in is keeping people alive so they can live and enjoy life, be with their communities, and see their loved ones grow up.
Yeah, I encourage our viewers to actually check this out and then dive deeper into the conversation. I'm sure that there are many subjects or many articles and probably other podcasts when you are talking about this topic, right?
Oh, yeah. Lots of them.
So maybe can you tell our listeners where can they follow your work and then where they can dive deeper into the subject?
Sure. Well, let me just say first, my campaign website is zoltanistván2026.com. And if you are an American resident, we appreciate donations, of course, because donations keep the campaign going. And if you just want to find out more about my work, including my Hungarian heritage, you can go to zoltanistván.com. I have something with my great-grandparents from Hungary and some of the stuff that I've done in Budapest and whatnot. So there's other stuff out there. And there's, I think, plenty of Hungarian articles as well during some of my campaigns and crazy adventures. So you can find all that stuff. But my campaign website is zoltanistván2026.com. And of course, I'm all over social media. So just find me there by Googling my name and please follow and see the content we're releasing. We're doing something every day, a couple times a day.
Well, thank you so much, Zoltán. That was a very interesting conversation. And your work on transhumanism and everything that you do is very inspiring. So I'm really grateful that you took the time and to talk to us today. And I hope you will have success in your campaign for 2026. And then you will be able to reach the changes that you wish to do in California.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to Bitcoin Kebab, the podcast by Bitcoin.